spectacular one-punch set of Manny Pacquiao's.
And you may hear it. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Guys, there's nothing like boxing, and there are no athletes like fighters.
Struggling to get to his feet. Takes another right. Burns in deep trouble again. Burns is down. Burns is down.
You know, you create a price, I guess, but the next set of it.
What's up, fight fans from all across the combat sport world? I'm Jay Cotto, and welcome to Jay Cotto's Fight Page, aka the Boxing and Jedi Temple. How's everybody doing this morning on a Wednesday? I hope you guys are good. We're about to get into something. Now, I just want to give you guys a warning. Some of you guys are extreme with your sports, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts. I just want to let you guys know that the shit that I'm going to be kicking is straight facts. Straight facts. You know why? Because it's not going to be said by me. It's going to be said by the people themselves. Okay? Now, there's this little thing going on between Dela Hoya and Dana White. And I respect both men. And of course, us combat sport fans, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts, we respect these men simply because of the entertainment and the athletes that they have presented before us. Also giving histories to the sport. And we also respect the athletes. Now, we have to understand here that these athletes are part of us. Yes, they are. But only in a fandom. And what I mean by that is, within a fandom, we can be nationalistic and cheer for whatever fighters, representing their countries. We can be patriotic. We can do all of that. Why? Because that's just the way it is. We have World Series. We have Olympics. That's fine. But now, when other things and other agendas are mixed into that fandom, it's no longer a fandom. It's toxic. It becomes something to a point where some take the sport and weaponize it, or some would just leave the sport. And it's funny that I say this because a lot of us have left both sports. Of course, because of fan reaction, but it's also because of fan backlash. Now, for several years, the fans have been desperately trying to debate each other. And for the first stages of a debate, it happens. But then the toxic fandom or the fanboyism comes out of the fight fan, whether it's a boxing fan or an MMA fan. Unbiased here, because both of them have this poison injected into the sport or their sports. You have to understand now, when you have these two entities facing each other, one wants to be better than the other. Even in real life, real time, when we speak on the promoters from both sports and managers from both sports, right? So it's sort of like a chess game on who's better. Well, that's subjective. Just like a pound for pound list, just like a hamburger from any other place that you judge. Fighters, who's better, can be subjective. But one fighter being better than the other is fact. But now when you compare these two sports, where boxer has transcended into MMA, only a few, and I repeat, only a few were successful. When you have MMA fighters transition into boxing, not many. And I repeat, not many are successful. And when I say not many, because the most successful MMA transitioning into a boxer, MMA fighter, should I say, is Anderson Silva. Now, as I take you to what Dana White has said, there are a few lies. And when I mean lies, I don't mean where it's a big lie, but it's just using the lie, weaponizing the lie in order to make UFC sound more superior. But then there are facts that when it comes to the business model of it, when it comes to the contracts, when it comes to fighters actually being compensated, it is MMA who falls short. Don't believe me? You know how I always do it? I do it verbatim here. And when I say verbatim, I do it to a point where I let the man or the person speak. And eventually, when you let people speak, sometimes they make their point, and sometimes they expose themselves. Not calling Dana White a liar or anything, but I'm calling this a big fabrication of some sort. Now, when we get to Oscar De La Hoya, and I can speak on Oscar De La Hoya because I am a boxing fan, an avid one at that, right? Us boxing fans know that Oscar De La Hoya is full of shit. That is fact. But one thing Oscar De La Hoya is not, at least to the fight fans, is a liar. He's not a liar when it comes to this subject. How fighters get paid. How boxers get paid or compensated correctly. The only complaint you would get from a boxer within boxing organizations would be they're not being promoted correctly. But they never say they're being shortchanged. But now, if you go to the UFC, they are being promoted correctly, but their pockets aren't right. And I agree with some. But here's Dana White talking on Oscar De La Hoya. Tries to show documents on what he pays the UFC fighters he employs, and there are a lot of them. And I will get back to you hitting my points as to exactly what's the problem with UFC. Because we all know what the problem with boxing is. And I'll even say it right now. The problem with boxing is that boxing has become more of a business than a sport. UFC is trying to keep the balance, or should I say mixed martial arts, is trying to keep the balance between the business model and the sport. And they have balanced it out for several years. But me witnessing this, I've also noticed that UFC also is transitioning more into the business model. Very prematurely. And it's on the behest of the fighters that they own. Here's Dana White.
Yeah. Did he say he loved the fight?
I think he said, what a great fight, but you got underpaid for it. I said he gave Alex some credit, maybe not you, though.
We doing this now? Is that what we're going to do? We're going to get into this?
No.
So here we go. Go ahead and hand out the thing to them. So normally, you guys know how this works. When people, people like to push the buttons and talk about fighter pay, and you don't ever see us coming out and talking about it or doing whatever, because I don't give a shit. When I got 20-something-year-old Jake Paul, a fucking YouTuber, talking about fighter pay, or these other guys on the internet, we know what the hell we're doing over here.
Notice how he seems irritated because he has to speak on fighters' pay. There is more proof that I'm going to show as to how Oscar De La Hoya is right in this situation. But let's continue, shall we? Let's continue.
At the end of the day, my philosophy is always this. It's nobody's fucking business what these fighters are making. None of these guys are under some type of gag order in their contract. Any fighter on the roster can come out and tell you guys what they make. Said this a million times. They can come out and tell you what they make. Ask them what they make. What'd you make tonight? They can tell you. They don't tell you. You know why they don't tell you? They don't want you to know.
Now that is false, because with what I'm about to show you, and from what we've heard and read from certain editorials, from MMA pundits, recording and jotting down verbatim from the mouths of the contenders and champions, even Conor McGregor had to extend himself to the sport of boxing to reach the wealth that he has now. Because in reality, if it wasn't for boxing, Conor McGregor would not have this wealth. Let's continue.
I wouldn't want you to know either. But at the end of the day, I've said this a million times, we run a real business, unlike boxing. Boxing doesn't run a real business. What these guys do is every event is a going out of business sale. You know, they're trying to get as much money as they can in the door. The two guys at the top of the card make all the money. And how many fights a year are they doing? 1, 3, 5? You know, I'm doing 52 to 53 events a year. So one of the other things we do and why we run real business is we reinvest in the sport. Not just the business of the UFC, but we reinvest in the sport. And we built a global business over the last 20 years.
Now, that is respectable. And it is innovative and groundbreaking because MMA, basically, you put it on the map. Okay, no problem. But now what you're not understanding here, Mr. White, is that compared to the boxing's 3-4 events a year, along with, and I think you know this, but you just don't want to bring it out to the light, there are also in-house shows with fighters going around in certain occasions that may not be televised. Boxing's done every day. From the amateurs and coming from other places as well. So what I'm trying to understand here, Mr. White, is exactly how is it that you have to put out 50, and I repeat, 50, at least you said, 50 events a year. You know you make tons of money. And you promote it. Oh yeah, you're promoted, you're doing your thing. But how is it that boxing is a failure because it supposedly promotes 1 to 3 or 4 events, but the UFC basically has to show even more? I'll tell you why. See, these are double-ended answers. If boxing is already established, and you said 20 years you should be already established, you should be like the boxing promoters. This is why boxers have longevity and MMA fighters don't. Because if you break it down, it's basically letting its work speak for itself when you let it become a sport. And the fighters, boxers, are paid 3 times as much than an MMA fighter. These are facts because he's about to go into numbers. I'm just trying to understand from a 20-year span, you're still on the business model of when you first came out, as the boxing has been through many business models and can sit back. Let me give you a little analogy. It's like a store, 2 stores. You have Walmart and you have a mom and pop store. Now, within a year, of course, Walmart is tripling, which is boxing, because Walmart's been there for the longest. And it's a corporation. It has expanded. That would be boxing. The mom and pop store is basically like UFC, where UFC basically has to sell more product and more product and more product to even equal one of the superstar fighters' earnings. These are facts. Let's continue. Just trying to make it make sense, man.
We have infrastructure. We have 450 employees that we hire. You know, a couple of years ago it was 350. We're at 450 now. UFC headquarters, Performance Institute. I found a space in Mexico City. Now we have a space that we're looking at and doing a deal for. We're going to build a PI there. We're doing Puerto Rico, Africa, and obviously we have one in China. I have offices in Brazil, London, Shanghai, and Singapore. We do all.
Now, you see all of that? That's great. You have expanded. You have expanded to other countries. That is awesome. But now, the expenses. You see, Bob Arum, on who you're about to speak on, and Oscar De La Hoya, on who you're about to speak on, only have one office. You just finished telling us you have an office in Brazil, you have an office here. Why is that necessary? When you could just rent, which is much cheaper, a nice luxury hotel conference hall. You can hold your pressers there, like boxing. And a hotel room while traveling, you, the promoter, and the other promoter, and whoever else is within the negotiations can meet. It's starting to show now exactly why. It's the expenses, Mr. White. But let's continue.
All of our own production, which most sports do not. We built the Apex, which has enabled us to put on fights through the pandemic, keep everybody working. We pay for USADA drug testing, which is a massive number every year, to keep the sport safe and fair.
Now, this is a fact. More MMA fighters within a fight card, a big event, and these are facts. I'm sorry if you're going to be triggered. I'm sorry if you feel like I'm being one-sided here, but I'm not. Because when he gets into boxing, I'll definitely get into that. But he's speaking on the MMA and what he's doing, so this is what we're doing. MMA fighters pop more dirty on their tests than boxers do. And these are facts. You can go back about 5 years, and every time boxing had a card, maybe one would pop. But there are times that both opponents going against each other have popped. These are facts. These are facts. So him talking about paying USADA and all of this, and it's a big number, why do you think boxers have USADA, VADA, and the other others that are out there? You see, just like you're making a mistake spending all this money having your little offices all over the world, because to me that sounds like a luxury. And then at the same time, you've got training camps and that you're building and expanding across the world, which is another expense, luxury expense. You also have to understand this, Mr. White. Boxers go to gyms where they can work on their craft. There are a lot of MMA gyms and a lot of MMA studios out here. Why won't they do that instead? Instead of you wasting all this money all around the world. Why? Yes, you do fight around the world. But now what happens when you're not fighting around the world? You still have to maintain all the rent over there. You still have to maintain the facilities. That's a luxury expense. But let's continue.
And when you think about it, guys like Arum and De La Hoya and people like this never had the vision to do anything like this. And it's never been done. And
This is exactly where you failed. First of all, you're speaking on Bob Arum, a promoter that has been there even before De La Hoya, that has employed De La Hoya. A promoter that's in the Guinness Book of World Records for successfully, and I repeat, successfully promoting fights. You're speaking on Bob Arum. People may call him a Jew. He's cheap, but why is he not struggling? Why is he richer than you? Because to us fight fans, we've understood, just like with this little Teofimo and Cambosis, we understood his business model at that time. While other extreme fight fans that in boxing We're calling him cheap, a slave driver, all at the end. All at the end of it. For Bob Arum to be right. You can never go with something that's premature to something that has already had life and is still living. Bob Arum is able to make fights when he has to make fights. He'll spend that money when he has to spend the money. You say yourself that Oscar De La Hoya is making money off Canelo. Well, that's what boxing is or used to be. You have your cash cow. All of this luxury promotion, luxury traveling, luxury facilities all over the world, luxury offices. Don't you think that's eaten up? And the reason why fighters are complaining about not being paid correctly? Let's continue.
Everybody thinks they know what they're talking about, and everybody has an opinion. And I say it all the time. You know what you guys know about this sport? About this, I shouldn't say the sport. You know what you guys know about this business? What I fucking tell you. That's what you know. That's all.
And that's the problem. But and then when your employees who are either still in competition or retire come out and say, you're not a good employer. You're stiffing us. Speak about it. You throw tantrums like this, but yet you want it to be gospel. You want it to be truth. But and then you say, you know about this business what the fuck I tell you you should know about this business. Which makes it a very, 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 very biased situation because then you can omit anything that's of importance for the knowledge of the fight fan to know, to actually complete the puzzle and the picture of looking at you as the owner / promoter. So you yourself cloud everyone's judgment by saying this. Let's continue.
Oh, you know, what we've done here has never been done in the history of combat sports. And we continue to grow this thing and build the sport bigger for everybody. There's no barrier to entry. Anybody can get into this, okay? Anybody can start an MMA promotion and get going. Jump in and figure it out like I did.
And they have, and they've failed. Why? Because the expenses are just too high. You just figured out on how to keep the ball rolling with luxury expenses by not paying these fighters millions, paying these fighters tens of thousands, 20s of thousands, 50s. Let's continue.
Figure it out, right? Now let's get into Dela Hoya. And the only reason that I'm telling you this is because he is a lying, two-faced, hypocritical sack of shit. And I hate him so much.
I agree with you 1,000,000%, Mr. White. Yes, Oscar De La Hoya is a fucking weird, lying piece of shit. Yes, he is. But not many have said this. Mostly everybody that has been let go of the UFC after they're gone, and that would be about 75% of your fighters so far, say the same thing about you. So just like Mr. Duncan here says that all he has to say about the matter is that both have merits and downfalls. Yeah, I agree with that. But whose downfall is steeper? And whose merit actually bears honor? More or less, correct? Weighing it out, correct?
That I love to prove that he's a lying, hypocritical, two-faced piece of shit.
And the proof will be shown that you are too. The problem here and the difference between you two is that Oscar De La Hoya doesn't try to defend himself, and he tells people, well, if they don't like it, well, then, they don't really have to stay. As to you, come out here and defend yourself with allegation only. But let's see the proof you're bringing.
All right. So let's start. I guess we'll start with his when he started an MMA event. Okay, he did his first MMA event, and just for the record, you guys could figure this out too and do this. This isn't some deep investigational journalism here that you couldn't have done. You guys can all look this up yourself. And so all the former UFC fighters who were on his card made more in their last bout than they did for his event. Most of them made more in multiple or all of their UFC bouts, right? So 17 of the 22 fighters got less than the starting compensation in the UFC. The guys who fought on his MMA card. Now, where I'm going with this asshole, every time he opens his mouth, acts like, number one, oh, you're not paying your fighters. Why are the fighters not being paid? And he acts like when he put on an event, like he pays more than we do or something. Yeah, you pay fucking Canelo a shitload of money, whom you couldn't even hold on to. You couldn't even keep. He fucking left you too, right?
That is fact. Yes, Canelo did leave him. Yes, he did. But Canelo wouldn't be who he was if he wasn't under Golden Boy and the moves that Oscar made. Yeah, his fight ethic bought it, but it was really the promoter who really put him on map. I mean, the word is self-explanatory. Promoter. That's number one. Number two, well, you just said that Oscar. So basically, you're saying Oscar De La Hoya failed at an attempt of making an MMA fight card. Well, that's not his forte. Let's not forget that you too tried to become a boxing promoter, I would say about almost a year ago, and that didn't work out for you at all. As a matter of fact, you didn't even get to make a card. So at least Oscar De La Hoya got his feet wet, failed, and admitted his failure. As to you taking his failure and bringing it in and trying to weaponize it now to say that what? That those fighters got paid less? Well, understand, Oscar De La Hoya's so-called MMA card, not company, not federation, like yours, which is worldwide, world class, and has championship straps. Oscar De La Hoya was just having matches with up and coming. Don't you think that the price value would be different, sir? Think about it. You hardly give out millions to fighters in a world class, world traveling corporation. And Oscar De La Hoya would give these guys more than $50,000, more than $100,000 for the bouts. And they were up and coming. Price value.
How about this? I have 650 fighters under contract. He had fucking one that mattered. He couldn't keep them.
So you have 650 fighters that you have to basically promote. Canelo Alvarez, you said verbatim. I mean, Oscar De La Hoya, you said verbatim, has one that he pushed and couldn't keep. Well, Canelo is on the way out, and Oscar De La Hoya wasn't fired mid-career. He was basically there for 85% of Canelo Alvarez's career. That's number one. Number two, 650 fighters that you have to basically treat all the same. And this is the problem. We have heard this from fighters. He does not promote the big names. And when he does, The fighters who were compensated don't even have enough after taxes.
Do you still have Ryan Garcia? I don't. Yeah. All right. Good for him. That'll be another 2 weeks before he fucking loses.
Now, man to man, everyone who is watching, or woman, but let's just say in the category of sportsmanship, if you speak on someone, you should know what you're speaking of about that person. These are facts. If I speak on Irving Morales and I'm saying something, it all has to be fact, not opinion. You just asked the question. You just asked if he still had a certain fighter and by the name of Ryan Garcia. That means that you just listened to what the fuck he said about you, and all you did was bring up the Canelo without knowing that Oscar De La Hoya, whether we like it or not, fishnet stockings and lipstick and all that shit, he's kind of a brilliant promoter. I mean, he's got fights that will be legendary in several more years that he's presented to us under Golden Boy. So I don't, and I'm not taking anything away from you, sir, because you, in that combat sport, have produced legendary fights as well. So what's the problem?
That kid, okay? 12 of the 22 fighters got less than the compensated less than what we pay kids on the Contender Series, okay? On that MMA event. The last time, remember the big narrative for that one was Chuck and Tito were going to make more than they ever made? Yeah. The last time Chuck Liddell made less than $250,000 in the UFC was in August of 2004 at UFC 49.
And you just basically see how you let people talk? And when they're so mad and egotistical and so spiteful, in between that, if you pay attention, you will get the truth. So Chuck Liddell at the time was a big name under your banner. And you're ridiculing what Tito Ortiz made under Oscar De La Hoya promoting a fight and Chuck Liddell. But you just finished saying that under your banner, he earned less. This is what he just said. This is verbatim. I am not a magician. I am not twisting anything. This is what he said.
Okay? The last time Tito Ortiz made less than $250,000 in the UFC was February of 2005 for UFC 251.
So he made less. Once again, another fighter made less when he was on the hot streak, when he was a golden ticket, when he was generating money for the company, right? Not being compensated correctly. This is what you just said. So what's the problem?
What do those have in common? They were both, and just for the record, that was when we were still $40 million in the hole. We weren't making money. We were $40 million upside down.
And why were you $40 million in the hole, sir?
That was the last time. After those dates came the Ultimate Fighter, and everything started to change and grow, right? So think about this. Chuck Liddell, his last fight in the UFC, right? Chuck lost 5 of his last 6, right? And he still made on his last fight in the UFC 10 times more than what Oscar paid him.
Well, sir, this was one fight with Oscar. You contracted him and employed him for many fights. Are you expecting him to make 10 times more than what he made in your company under Oscar De La Hoya with one fight? Is this asinine, sir?
Okay. Tito Ortiz won one of his last 9 fights. Tito Ortiz's last 9 fights, he won 1. He made 12 times in the UFC for his last fight what Oscar paid him.
Right. And the reason why he made that much under you, let's not forget here. You see, this is what I mean about omitting stuff. Didn't you just say UFC was $40 million in the hole? Didn't you say that? Don't we remember that UFC was on the come up, as he said, that was on the come up, and were already placed there, made their mantle. It's just the business model wasn't correct. So basically, you're still contradicting yourself. You really have nothing on Oscar De La Hoya because Oscar De La Hoya was the smarter promoter here. You decided to hire a fucking no-name that was within the sport to come back on fight cards, and you paid him 12 times. As to Oscar De La Hoya was able to pay this man what he was worth in a field where he didn't have no knowledge of. Yeah, he's a mixed martial artist, but he is not a boxing master, a student of the game. Listen to what you're saying. So you're going to pay somebody who don't know how to really box 12 times what he made doing what he's really a professional at? Sir, it's asinine what you're saying, sir.
So it's not like I'm giving you numbers. Oh, Tito was the champion, and this is what he made. He got a piece of pay-per-view. Chuck was the champion. He got a piece of pay-per-view. This was the last fight on their contracts after Tito won 1 of his last 9, and Chuck was 5 of his last 6 had lost. Okay? So there's another fucking lie from Oscar De La Hoya.
Well, if you take a look at it, it's not. Because probably what he paid them had more value than what you paid them within those 12 fights, sir. If Oscar De La Hoya gave Chuck Liddell or Tito Ortiz $1 million to box in a field that they not even student of the games of, what business did you have paying these guys under contracts less than that? This is the argument you're making. It's asinine.
Let's get into Volkanovski. He's very concerned about Alexander Volkanovski for some fucking reason. Like he needs Oscar De La Hoya's help, right? Think about this. Oh, wait, let me get into this first.
Okay. So while you get into that and get yourself straight, sir. So you're talking about Volkanovski. You're saying he was already on there and he really didn't need Oscar De La Hoya's help. Well, Volkanovski wasn't really heard of, just like Liddell and Chuck and Ortiz after a while, after they got their name out there, because they took a recess and they did whatever they were doing from the sport. So he hired Oscar De La Hoya, a promoter, to promote them again, just like you promoted them. This is so asinine.
So what you've been handed, I could have brought 30 of these, okay? I brought one because it's June 9th, 2021, okay? This was a fight that just happened in June. It's a Golden Boy Promotions fight that this dickhead put on, okay? There were 9 fights, 18 fighters. The total purses paid for every fight was $36,500 total. The average purse per fighter is $2,000 on a Golden Boy De La Hoya card. Let me start again. He's concerned about Alexander Volkanovski, okay? Before we pay $1 in fucking purse money, right? Volkanovski got paid more to wear his UFC Venom kit than Oscar De La Hoya paid the entire fucking fight card.
Well, sir, because obviously you didn't do your homework as to who Oscar De La Hoya was actually promoting, because you did ask if Ryan Garcia was still under his wing. So you came to this with no facts, and you have no facts now of what you're speaking, because if these guys aren't stars, the same treatment you give your guys, which are actually stars, and the guys that aren't, what business would you have paying them millions of dollars? See, the money in boxing is basically an incentive. And it's glad to hear this because us fight fans from boxing were actually worried that fighters were being paid too much and fighting less. But obviously, that's not going on in Golden Boy. But it's going on in PBC. It's going on in other promotions where fighters don't even deserve that money. And you too, just now, and the way you function, don't pay your fighters what they're worth either. This is asinine.
Do you understand what I'm saying? To walk out with the Venom fight kit on, he was paid more than Oscar paid the entire fucking fight card.
So now you're throwing in the way basically what? Sponsors? So he came out with the Venom kit to sponsor the movie Venom when it was. What's the problem? What's the problem? You're trying to compare sort of like an athlete getting an endorsement from a movie. Of course, that's going to be more because it's a fucking endorsement, but that has nothing to do with what you contracted. That's right. It has nothing to do with the money you were giving him as a fighter. Two different categories. You see what I mean about omitting?
I could go on, but I think we all get the fucking point.
You can go on, but you cut short because you have nothing. This is all anger. Because Oscar De La Hoya is calling you out on your shit. And fighters are too. I will give it to you in a second. Let's finish this up.
He's a liar. And what is his interest in talking about the UFC? And this is the thing. Every time somebody comes out and says, "Oh, you don't pay your fighters, you don't pay your fighters," I can come out and do this every fucking. I'm not. I don't give a shit. You don't like the way we pay our fighters? Too fucking bad. Go.
And there it is. And there it is. So when we compare Oscar De La Hoya, regardless, he's a cross-dressing fucking, egotistical fucking maniac. He actually cares for his fighters. Especially if it profits. If he knows that he's got to pay a fighter that he's putting up like Canelo loads of cash, he knows that he's got to make boatloads of cash, not only for the fighter, for himself, and for the promotional company. Making sure that the fighters are compensated as to where you just told us, if you don't like what we're paying our fighters, fuck it. I don't give a fuck. Who's a better promoter, sir? This is all anger.
Go start another MMA organization and you go fucking figure out how to do it. You can pay them $10 million a fight, $30 million a fight, whatever you want to do. We run.
And this man is a man who's comfortable with the formula that he has brought. And the only reason why fighters go through MMA and get paid shit is because you've branded yourself sort of like a Vince McMahon, to where you took every MMA fucking little circuit there and you just made it a big old fucking franchise. So they have no choice to become a household name unless they come through you. So now you're holding up the stake to a bunch of hungry fucking fighting dogs.
Run a business. We've been very good at it. Not only do we run the business, we continue to grow the sport and take everybody along with us. Tonight, like Laura Sanko said, this whole contender series was all foreign guys that are coming in here to fight. Everybody makes money. Everybody makes a living. There are some hard stories, some sad stories. Some guy came into this. You're either fucking good enough to be here or you're not.
Right. But when guys are good enough and then there, why is it that after they leave, in which they're able to speak now freely because they couldn't under contract, if those are wondering, well, why didn't they talk the shit while they were there? Well, they're under contract, and basically in a fine print, if you say something about the company you're supposed to be representing and working and being employed under, you can be terminated or fined. So when they leave, the truth comes out. Now we understand why. But let's continue.
This is the big leagues. It's like the NFL. You can either last here or you can't last here. But people get paid. People get paid a lot of money.
And the people you speak of are the people that are executives that are helping you push your brand and yourself, sir. The fighters are not happy.
Any questions about this sack of shit and his lying?
Just last one. Do you ever think about maybe suing him for defamation?
No, listen, I'm not suing anybody. I always say this, we all talk shit about each other, They don't like me, I don't like them, we all don't like each other. It is what it is. This is a very mean business. We say mean things about each other. You got people out there that fucking lie. If I lied, guys, if I lied the way that this fucking scumbag lies and these other guys, if I did this shit, and there's so much more on De La Hoya. He owes people money that fought for him that he hasn't paid. The list goes on and on. If I ever did imagine if I still owed a fighter money from fucking a year ago.
Actually, sir, you do. There are 4 of them. But let's continue.
You would crucify me on a daily basis. This guy, nobody gives a shit. And the only reason I just despise him so bad that every time he fucking lies, I point it out. And
every time he lies, you point it out. Every time. Okay, so let me bring your attention to basically UFC fighters and a report that came out where John Jones and the rest of them come out and they tell you exactly what Dana White has done and are about. Let's get to it.
We're going to find out. And if we can fight every time that we came across each other, we would.
A new report says UFC paid fighters less than 16% of revenue. The Ultimate Fighting Championship reportedly made close to $1 billion in revenue last year, and the promotion's president, Dana White, has said it was the company's best to date. But according to a new report, the fighters who risked it all in the octagon took less than 16% of that money. In recent years, there's been talk about the UFC losing steam in the mainstream on account of having too many events. Doubts about the company's growth were also spiked by Conor McGregor's relative inactivity in recent years and the move of Ronda Rousey to pro wrestling. White, however, has repeatedly shot down that theory and has insisted that the company continues to break its own revenue records. Case in point, this past December, White shared out this comment before the year was up. 2019 was the biggest year in the company's history, White wrote on social media. I want to thank all the fighters, the fans, the media, and my staff at UFC. I can't wait for 2020. Hashtag still kicking ass. Happy holidays, everyone. Well, more recently, the New York Post ran a story on the UFC's earnings, as sources told the outlet that the promotion is going to pay out $300 million in dividends to its investors. Some of those investors include celebrities like Mark Wahlberg, Charlize Theron, Gisele Bündchen, Ben Affleck, and Serena and Venus Williams.
How you doing? Have a great day.
So basically, what's being said here is that he's broken a piece of the pie with the elite in Hollywood. $300 million dividends. You're talking about people that owe money, but yet you're breaking bread. And it's okay. It's okay to have investors. But these investors are putting more money into the machine as to the machine are paying the actual nuts and bolts. They're not being oiled and greased down well. So that $300 million dividend, and they're only getting 16% of what? Really?
All this comes at a time when the UFC is battling a lawsuit from a group of fighters, which the New York Post story notes alleges the UFC, quote, engaged in anti-competitive practices intended to drive down their compensation costs, including forcing fighters into long-term contracts that prevent them from fighting elsewhere, and, quote,
This never happened in boxing. I know a lot of you MMA fight fans are triggered, but don't hate me. No. I'm just bringing the attention. And I'm putting respect where respect should be. I'm one from foundation. And whether we like Oscar De La Hoya or not, Oscar De La Hoya is a way better promoter than Dana White. There is no equal when it comes to that now.
using its market dominance to coerce fighters to re-sign contracts. In addition, the aforementioned story cites a source who claims the UFC's fighters cost the Las Vegas promotions company less than $150 million last year, or under 16% of its $900 million in revenue. So if those figures are accurate, the UFC is paying out far less of its revenue to its athletes than other big pro leagues. For example, Major League Baseball, the National Football League, and the NBA all pay between 48 and 50% of its revenues to their players. Now, it's also worth noting that Mark Shapiro, who is the president of Endeavor, the parent company of the UFC, has defended the promotion's compensation model. For example, Shapiro was quoted saying, "It's different league by league. We pay our fighters significantly more than any other MMA organization. They deserve it. Fighter compensation has gone up commensurately with the success of UFC." Looks like not all fighters agree with Shapiro's take. Retired UFC fighter Nate Quarry tweeted out this: "Yeah, we know. Boxers get upwards of 85% of the revenue they generate because they fought for it with the Ali Act. Now we're fighting for the Ali Expansion Act and in our class action lawsuit. We'll get there. It's our turn to stand up for ourselves and our family's future." UFC and Bellator vet Devin Powell tweeted out this: "First UFC fight, I left that cage with a broken eye socket plus a paycheck for $10K. Then I got taxed heavily. Pay manager, pay for 2 plane tickets to Arizona out of pocket, pay for food and camp. We'd do it free, but deserve better." But what do you guys think? Is the UFC underpaying their fighters, or is the compensation model set up right, whereby the best are making big bucks? Or is it of both?
And there you have that. Now, I'm not disrespecting MMA at all. I respect the fighters. I myself was into kickboxing, so I respect these guys. And this is exactly why I've decided to do this as well, this little special, because there's a lot of bickering going on with no facts. Now, I've searched the YouTube engine to see, I searched the Google engine to see if anyone had ever said that Oscar De La Hoya was as to what Mr. White is. And I didn't get it. So once again, I say this. Do not be mad at me. Take a look at what I'm saying. If you still question it, then go and prove me wrong. Because everything that Dana White has said was a lie, because it was verbatim. It was contradiction. It was also hate, spiteful, being spiteful, and just having a problem with people telling him the shit that he's pulling on his fighters. On top of that, he said at the end, if I was the one, bottom line, if I was the one doing this, you guys would come and lynch me and get at me. Well, They have. The fighters have. But it seems like the MMA fans, as long as they get the action, they don't care. Except for when boxing is being compared to MMA as to what's better. Choosing what you like between the two brands, that's subjective. But now, who is a better, and I repeat, who is a better sport? Who's a better promoter? And who takes care of their fighters financially? Would be boxing. Because you never heard Oscar De La Hoya or any promoter in boxing, well, if they don't like it, fuck it. It was on here. You heard it verbatim. So UFC is to be respected and so are the Warriors. But can we actually defend? Can you, MMA fans, actually defend Dana White at the end of it all? My answer to you, and it wouldn't be opinion, it would be fact, no, you couldn't. You couldn't defend this man. Why? Because it came out of his own mouth. Otherwise than that, this has been The Insight. You can catch me later on Electro Jets channel at 7 p.m. And before I close, you just joined here, Mr. Peterson. Rewind this, and you will see. From a business perspective, White's better. From a fighter perspective, De La Hoya is better. No, not at all, sir. I respectfully disagree. But thank you for joining. Otherwise than that, I'm your boy, the Boxing Jedi. God bless. Stay vigilant. Peace to the UK as well. Peace to Australia. Peace to Ireland. God bless all you guys. Peace, guys.
That is the most spectacular one-punch set of Manny Pacquiao's.
And you may hear it. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Guys, there's nothing like boxing, and there are no athletes like fighters.
Makes another right. Burns in deep trouble again. Frazier down.
You create a fight, I guess, but the big celebrate.